Welcome back. It's now time for our final segment. This segment is called the main course. The main course. This is our discussion segment. Today's topic is there any such thing as a conservative non-Trump supporter? Yes. Now, please don't tune me out. Don't click this off. Trust me. This is going to be good. Ever since I started this podcast, I've never really paid attention to current events like this before I started this podcast. And paying attention to current events and doing all this research, not all of this research, it's not a whole lot, but just skimming around and just looking around and seeing what's going on in the world has really, really opened my eyes to where the world is headed and to where I'm headed, it's really enlightened me to myself and given me a stronger identity as to my relation to the world around me. I kind of lived in my own world until I educated myself on the world. I spent a lot of time educating myself on myself, but now that I'm educating myself on the world, I have a different tool in my tool shed. And I feel like if you pay attention, if you stay tuned in this podcast, you will too. So I saved the definition of a conservative for last because that's what this is about. But I want to build up to it. Okay. So first, let's break down what is a liberal. All right. Because when we talk about a bipartisanship politics, it doesn't really boil down to Democrats and Republicans. Democrats and Republicans are what's on paper, but when it comes to opinions and beliefs and stances, it really boils down to conservatives and liberals. In this day and age, back in the day, yeah, that's what it was about, Democrats and Republicans. But now it's become a lot more complicated, or not even complicated, but just there's different brackets to it now. So a liberal is a person who is open to new behavior or opinions and willing to discard traditional values. Someone who's favorable to or respectful of individuals' rights and freedoms. Now, that's the key right there. In a political context, it's favoring maximum individual liberty in political and social reform. Now, I like the favorable and respectful of individual rights and freedoms because I feel like that's what we all should be, So in reading these things, I was trying to find my place. Okay, am I conservative? Am I liberal? And so yeah. And then now on my Facebook timeline, people were calling themselves independent. So I'm like, okay, what is an independent? An independent is variously defined as a voter who votes for candidates on issues rather than on the basis of political ideology or partisanship. I like that. I think that's how all people should vote. I think we should vote for issues rather than partisanship, It's like, okay, you Republican, but your views and your opinions line up with mine. You know what I'm saying? Maybe not wholeheartedly, maybe not 100%, not each and every one, but for the most part, I could see myself living under your administration. You know what I mean? And that's what it really boils down to. Can you see yourself living under this person's administration? I have people quoting, yes, I've been so when I pose the question on Facebook, is there any such thing as a conservative non-Trump supporter? One says, yes, I've been called a fiscal Republican and a social Democrat. So maybe I'm just independent. And maybe you are. A big argument in that thread came up about the stop and frisk spotlight. And it's ironic, as I tuned into CNN tonight, it was brought up about, Bloomberg, who was the mayor of New York, which was like pretty much the hub of stop and frisk when it came to law enforcement. And what what effect did stop and frisk have on crime? But however, what effect did it have on the social quality of life for black people in New York City? Was I ever stopped and frisked? No, I was stopped one time as a teenager, but I was never really, I wasn't about that life. I played sports. I was into girls. I had a mom and dad at home who both worked a job. You know what I'm saying? So I wasn't in the streets like that. I wasn't carrying a gun. I didn't live in an area that was heavily high crime area. So, there wasn't really much reason for cops to stop and frisk me. But I remember the heartache and pain that the stop and frisk law caused, and the rejoicing of it when it got lifted. It was a two-sided coin, because some people liked it because it dropped crime. It cut the murder rate in half. It did a lot for the city and the quality of life there, and it kind of made way. It was one of those laws, those laws that made way for gentrification. I think Bloomberg kind of piggybacked on what Giuliani had already established. But the people who applaud stop and frisk, they look at the younger generation as like crybabies. And this goes into the cancel culture sensitivity. They looked at the younger generation as crybabies because they don't really understand or see how these harsh laws are actually saving them. But what the younger generation is quote unquote crying about is how harassing it is, how harassive it is to be stopped and frisked. Now, I don't like to be stopped. I don't like to be stopped at all doing anything. Let me not digress. But so I could only imagine, what it's like walking down the street, minding my business, and then to be stopped by police, let alone just be stopped, So yeah, stop and frisk, that's another topic. But, some conservatives may roll with it. Mitt Romney and John McCain serve as great examples of conservative non-Trump supporters. These are guys who, they play the right, and when I say the right, what I mean is, I mean conservative. When you hear, the right this and the left that, the right is conservative, the left is liberal. That's what they mean, pretty much. But yeah, they serve the right, but they don't serve Trump. And I like that about them. I respect that. Here's what one person on my timeline had to say about Trump. Trump is the poster boy for conservatism. He is everything conservatives have embraced for decades rolled into one. He personifies all they believe, allow, and contribute to. While Trump is the head conservative in charge, those who don't support him would be declaring themselves independents. So the poster boy for conservatives, that's a little extreme. That's a little extra. You know what I'm saying? That's a little absolute. I don't think it's that absolute. The poster boy for conservatives. I think Trump is the poster boy for a lot of bigot white people. I think that's all he is, the poster boy for. And he has no allegiance to anyone or to anything that he says. Like I just wish people would wake up and stop drinking the Kool-Aid, and just see right through these tactics. He's a textbook narcissist, but I digress again. I think he just reminds a lot of people of their bigot dad or grandfather at the dinner table, while their wife fetches the beer with the black eye. You know what I'm saying? He just reminds those people of them. So yeah, that's a little it's a little extreme, but I get it. I get why someone would think that, because a lot of the hardcore conservatives are really hardcore, Trump. You know what I mean? He's their superhero, he's their spirit animal. But one would think, as threatening as Trump may be to a lot of the disenfranchised demographics, do white people feel oppressed in this day and age? That's an important question. That's an important question, because everyone claims and believes and is so sold on Trump being such a bigot and such a racist. But is the playing field balanced? Are white people being oppressed? Do white people feel oppressed under this administration? That's a good question to ask. Why is being black in America synonymous with oppression and poverty? Why have we drank the media's Kool-Aid on these things? Like, there are no black people who are successful and powerful and prominent, and opulent, aside from being athletes and entertainers. There are no powerful black people in corporate America. There are no powerful black people in, other institutions and other realms other than sports and entertainment. Are there? You know what I mean? Like, why is it so synonymous? That's one thing that always struck me throughout my life, really. And why do we always have to compare the quality of our life to that of whites? Oh, white people have this, so we should have that too. White people have this privilege, so we should have that too. White people got this going for them, we should have that too. Like, we don't need that. We don't need that. What we need is what's for us. Why are Republicans synonymous with racism or with being racist? If someone's Republican, so they're racist. I think it's unfair. It's important now when we talk about the two parties. It's important to understand the history. We have to remember. We have to never forget, right? We never forget slavery, right? If we're never going to forget slavery, we should also never forget that it was the Republicans who freed the slaves. Now, how the Republican Party changed, the Republican and Democrat parties changed in their stances after World War II, because the Democrats, the Southern white Democrats, were adverse to the progressivism of the Republicans after World War II, because they wanted to get into big industry and big corporations and things like this. Because you got to remember, this is the 1940s, so the Ford, the car, the automobile was a big thing back then. It was a new thing, and just coming up, a big industry in Detroit and, General Motors and all of that. That was a big boom after World War II. And, the Republicans were all about that back then. And the Southern white Democrats, who were for slavery, were against all of this progressivism. And so from World War II all the way up until, the 80s and 90s, the Democrats became, don't quote me. Please don't quote me. I think it's the other way around. Yeah, Southern whites who were for slavery started leaving the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party wanted to be more progressive. There you go. Yeah. See. But I had to research this. And yeah, the Democratic Party wanted to be more progressive. So, and then the Republicans wanted to stay conservative. But prior to that, during the slave era, it was the Republicans who wanted to free the slaves because they were for the progressive North. But yeah, don't quote me, don't confuse me. So yeah, like the parties sway with the times. They change, they shift, and so it's important to not vote by your party, but vote by the issues. Vote by the issues that matter to you. So like, why are black voters synonymous with the Democratic Party? Just because you black means you're a Democrat? That's not fair either, you know? One thing I've realized is that the more educated I've become, like, because before I used to vote Democrat just cause. And I used to I was brainwashed. I used to, drink the Kool-Aid. Oh, I'm black, so I'm going to vote Democrat. I literally used to think that way. And I know there's a lot of you probably listening to this who probably still think that way, you know. But as I gotten older and more mature and more wise and more educated and learned how to think with a skeptical mind and question everything and understand that every truth is a half truth, you know, that there's more to it, you know what I mean? And the more questions I asked, the more I've kind of re-identified myself, sort of. I've just gotten smarter. And you know, the Bible says people perish for a lack of knowledge. You know, knowledge reigns supreme, you know. So yeah, but let me not digress. I think when it comes to black people, to the black vote, a lot of times it's always the lesser of two evils. You know, you're not really for either of them, but you feel like this person, it will hurt a lot less if you vote for this person as opposed to that person. So a lot of black folks feel that way. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? All right. What is conservatism? What is conservatism? The definition of a conservative would be holding to traditional attitudes and values and cautious about change or innovation, typically in relation to politics or religion. Now, I've never been the traditional type. I've never been the one to hold on or adhere to any kind of, I've never been cautious. I've always been for innovation and progression, as long as it provides some sort of functionality and practicality. You know, is it practical? Can this be done? Can it be done in an efficient way? And what is the result of it? What is, how does this make things better? What is the function of it? So yeah, being traditional and all that kind of stuff, that's where I kind of step out of the Venn diagram circle of conservatism. Being that, just holding on to tradition, and when it comes to politics and religion, like whatever, that's the thing that always confused me or left me in a fog about traditional people. Is like, why are you holding on to the tradition? What purpose? Like I said, what is your tradition practical and functional? Are you doing it because it's making your quality of life better for you and the people around you? Or are you doing it because it just makes you feel good about yourself and it has some sort of sentiment to your memory? You know what I mean? Like what is the real hang up? What are you holding on to really? And so yeah. However, a lot of conservatives feel as though black people are too victim-minded. And that I do agree with. These are the tenets I've been cackling at for the past 10 years plus on YouTube. Back since I started in 2008, since I started recording videos in 2008, is, this woe is me mentality about how the man and the system and the blah, 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 and the blah, blah, blah. One thing I've always been saying about the system is that the system is not for or against anyone. The system is designed. It's not designed for or designed against anyone. It's simply designed to work. And the people who it's working for are the people who are working the system, you know. And the only way you can work the system is if you learn the system. Like I said, knowledge reigns supreme, knowledge over everything, you know. So if you got to learn the game in order to play it, because if you don't play, you can't win. And that's what the system is about. And so the victimhood that a lot of black people take, in some cases it may be warranted, but in most cases it's not. In most cases it's not. Am I blind to racism? Fuck no. You know, pardon my French, you know what I mean? But cause one thing I have full understanding of is institutionalized racism. You know, racism that's been structured where there's an entire financial corporation built around racism. You know what I'm saying? That I do understand, you know, like the prison industrial complex. You know, I get that, you know, but for the most part, you know, I do believe that there is a little bit of bootstrapping that is necessary. You hear a lot of conservatives say that as well. Oh, you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Now, some people don't have the quote unquote boots to pull themselves to strap themselves up with, and I get that. But for the most part, if there's a will, there's a way. And if you really want to get out of your situation, you're going to get out of it. You know what I mean? Some way, somehow, you know, you'll find the means. And, you know, some way, somehow, I do believe that as well. You know, yeah, things, you know, the system is fucked up. The world is fucked up. Your situation is fucked up. But if you scratch and claw and bite and seek knowledge, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. There's no way around that. A lot of conservatives debate capitalism versus welfare, you know, whereas the capitalist side of it would be the bootstrap argument, you know, just pull yourself up and, you know, get out of your situation. Whereas the welfare argument would be, you know, we have to help these people out. We have to, if we make $1, we got to give them a penny. You know what I mean? And, you know, a lot of conservatives feel like that's not fair. You know, welfare isn't fair. They call it welfare, but it's not fair. You know, I always believe that it's a government's duty to take care of its poor because you're only as strong as your weakest link, you know, and what good is you thriving and being successful and you know, being so wealthy if the people in the same community, because we're all one, I feel like we're all one big community at the end of the day. And if the same people in your community are struggling, then you're not wealthy. You're not wealthy if they're struggling. So there's a certain dance you have to do with it. A lot of, especially black conservatives, agree that fatherless homes are the main are the main virus in the black community. Fatherless homes are the virus of the black community. The tearing down of the black family starts with the fatherless home. And as someone who's worked with children in the past, someone who has children, someone who's dealt with a lot of family drama, like I said, I grew up with both of my parents, you know what I mean? But I was in a single parent situation for a long time. I can attest to that. Scientific studies may differ or oppose that notion that a fatherless home isn't a cause and effect. They say it may be a correlation, but it's not necessarily a cause and effect. But I say fuck that. It's a cause. It's a cause. A lot of these kids out here that don't know how to act, that can't sit still or can't conduct themselves in a classroom or in a school environment, you know, bouncing off the walls and all this other stuff, and you know, can't complete a decent education, can't be consistent to anything, or don't know how to be men, have no discipline, have no kind of manners, or whatever the case may be. It's because they're missing a father. Point blank, period. And only men can raise men. And I know you single mothers don't want to hear it, but go ahead, try to teach me how to be a woman. You know what I'm saying? Can I teach you how to be a woman? Exactly. So what makes you think you could teach a young boy how to be a man? You know what I'm saying? So yeah, take that to the bank for what it's worth. Is oppression isolated or interconnected? So are like oppressive structures and oppressive rules, set in place, are they so if you feel oppressed, if you feel like a certain system is oppressing you, is that connected to every other system that's oppressing every other people? This is something to think about. Like, let's say, for instance, the heavy drug laws of the crack era, right? When I researched this and I looked into this, we all now in this day and age, we realize that the government was funding the crack era. They weren't actually funding crack; they were funding coke. They were buying coke, bringing it into the country, and giving it to black drug dealers to peddle off into the streets, in order for South American rebel militaries to fight against drug lords and communist drug lords of their day. We know this now. We didn't know it back then, but the government was then in turn tacking on heavy prison sentences on very small, minuscule amounts of crack and not coke. Because, wealthy white people were using coke, while, poor black people in the ghettos were selling and using crack. Because crack was cheaper and it was remanufactured and it was cheaper to sell into the hoods. And so they were putting heavier sentences on crack as opposed to coke. But it just so happened that more black people were selling crack as opposed to coke, as opposed to white people selling coke. So a lot of black folks, a lot of black men were being incarcerated for decades, for decades at a time. You know what I mean? And it was highly punitive, and it was unfair. It seemed unfair. It seemed irrational, but at the time, the media had propagandized, if that's a word, that crack was such an epidemic. However, they were the ones financing the epidemic, but they were calling it an epidemic in the media. So this is how twisted and institutionalized this has become. But I think in the grand scheme of things, I think what the government was doing was plugging holes in a dam. They were saying to themselves, oh shit, we fucked up. We need to stop this. We need to pull this back. So they so this was their way of clamping down on it and trying to clean up, so to speak. But, the cat has been out the bag for some time now. We know the game. We know the game. But anyway, either or, we all want the same thing. We all want a boot to pull our straps up by at the end of the day. And it's high politics, high national politics are cool, are good to focus in on. But if we really want to make an impact, I think it's important that we focus in on our local politics. And that's something that I will be working on myself personally. I think this is trying to identify myself as a conservative or a liberal or independent has really opened my eyes. Now that I have a knowledge upon myself, I can now have a knowledge on my world. And that's what I think that's really going to change my life. I think I always used to think politics was an old people thing, and because you always see old people go hard about politics, but there's a reason. They see something that we younger folks, don't or didn't. And now that I'm getting older, I'm starting to see what they see. I'm starting to see that, I really have a finger in, a hand in this matter. And, I can really do something about, my life to some degree through these politics. So yeah, it's really enlightened and enriched my perspective. And I think it can do the same for you if you follow this podcast. But that's just the topic for today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in to the very end. I hope you learned something. I know I did. And that concludes our show. And we would like to thank you for tuning in to Prosperity U LLC. And remember to invest in the brand.